Kevin, as always, as you know, we do appreciate you hopping on with us. I want to start with Wednesday night, which is what Padres fans want to start with, not necessarily the game or the results, but what was said post-game. They had the players-only meeting, and then Juan Soto saying how the team at times, sometimes, quote-unquote, literally quits. What was your reaction to what Juan Soto had to say after that loss Wednesday night?
Well, let's remember that used literally in such a way that the dictionary actually changed it to basically say it could be literally or it could just be a figure of speech. So let's just remember that Andy's in his second language. But you guys, we've talked about that before, right? But I promise you, like, this was not a second language situation. This was, he meant what he said. There was some frustration in it. He certainly didn't mean every player. But look, this team has a penchant for 4, 5, 6 innings at the end of games, or when they get down by a couple runs, it doesn't look good. And he's not the first person, to say after a game, Bob Melvin has, Jake Cronenworth has, there's others I can't remember off the top of my head, so I don't want to say, but like other guys have said this. So there's at least some kernel of truth in this, and I don't know. I think it's like been a season long issue. I don't think maybe that it's this 5-alarm fire, but it is. Sorry about that. You know what? One of the players who actually does do is at bats every at bat. Thought I was talking to him, so he came over and wanted to see what I was saying. So that was nice of him, but it distracted me because I'm an old man. But I can't do two things at once. So anyway, I don't know that it's the 5-alarm fire that we maybe would tend to make it, but I do think that there was enough truth in it that, and I wrote a couple weeks ago, there's something about this team's lack of urgency that has to be addressed. And I wrote that when they were actually going pretty good, because I think it's an issue, and it has been an issue for, say, 3 years. And so I think that it's something that needs to be addressed. Did Wednesday night post-game meeting change that? I don't know. Did any of the 3 previous post-game meetings change anything? I don't know. Probably facing the Diamondbacks, if anything, will change it. Now, I didn't just guarantee a win, but, they've handled the Diamondbacks pretty well. The Diamondbacks are scuffling. So it's probably good timing for a team meeting.
And my next question was about the team meeting. First off, who calls these team meetings? Like, who is the player on this team that organizes, hey, we're closing the doors, we're talking here, media's not allowed in? Who's that player? Do you know?
It is generally Manny. Xander has stepped up before. I do not know about Wednesday night's meeting. So, there was an off day yesterday. It was like getaway day. Guys were, I'll just say this, not that this, means, don't read too much into this, but you know what? Guys were out here at 2:00 hitting some big names. Not that hasn't happened before. And guys were, getting after it before the game. Whether it translates, whether it, ends up meaning anything, like Bob Melvin said in his pregame gaggle, it's about winning. You got to go out and show it. But I will say the guys have been pretty into it today. I do not know exactly how Wednesdays went down, to answer your question. It is generally at this point Manny, Xander, but Joe, I do not know if Joe spoke in this one. Joe definitely talked. The way that these have gone earlier this year is multiple people speak up and kind of give their 2 cents of what is happening and what is not happening. And the tone of this one was evidently like previous ones, we're better than this. And some calling out. I don't think that, I don't think Juan Soto said something there that he didn't say in the meeting or that wasn't said in the meeting, because it lined up with what some other people said, that like we got to have more fight than this.
Well, where I was going to go with this, Kevin, is why I asked you who calls these team meetings. Is like, if let's just say for conversation's sake, Manny Machado's called multiple team meetings this year, because this is not the first one. So is Manny Machado's message in the clubhouse, is his voice not being heard? Because this is not the first meeting that they've had where you had the one of your leaders of the team be the driving force in it. So like, is the message in the locker room being, received by who was calling these team meetings? That it doesn't feel like it is, because nothing's changed.
So I'll say this. valid question. And I mean that like that's a question we have to ask. And that's what I meant a couple weeks ago when I was like, there's something has to be addressed, whether it's, probably after the season, that like, what is the culture problem here? And so that's a valid question that you just asked. I can't answer it for you definitively. What I will say is, as you pointed out, what is the evidence? And the evidence is, they haven't worked out so great. Now, there were a couple meetings last year that one that I was, told not to write about. And sometimes there's circumstances that I find out something, but it's in an off the record situation. And I was told not to write about one that happened earlier in the season, and they lost that day. Now, there was the one, right, after the game here on September 15th that, we all wrote about. And look, they went on a big run after that. Look, just because it doesn't work out and it translates into wins after a meeting doesn't mean a meeting wasn't a good idea, or that the message in there was given by the wrong person or whatever. That doesn't necessarily mean that. But I will say again, the evidence is that, whatever is being said by whoever's saying it is not, it's not having the desired effect.
Well, there's no doubt about it. Kevin Acee is our Padres insider. He's with us right now on John and Jim, the all-new San Diego Sports 760. Okay, a couple of things. How about Joe Musgrove, who is, hoping to work his way back? How much of Joe Musgrove's future in 2023 is contingent on the team's play? Because if they continue to just kind of hang around under 500, is there any real motivation to get him back in September?
I would think not. But now, that could be like if Joe will push. I don't care where they're at. If they're still alive, Joe will push. But he was the guy who set the whole, 6 days and, I'll be back for the Seattle and all that. Like that, Joe was driving that, and he really thought that was going to happen. So, he also then has, based on how this has gone this year, where he fought through so much stuff, that he has probably learned this year that he needs to listen a little bit more and maybe be a little more cautious. So that's why I say I would think that if they, I don't know what the magic number is, but if they are not doing well, that there's less motivation and less of a chance that we see him. Now, that said, he could check out completely 100% fine, and it really doesn't matter, and there's any potential for further damage. And then what difference does it make? Joe Musgrove, the competitor, will be back on the mound. But yes, I would think that that's something to keep an eye on.
Kevin, would you be surprised if Bob Melvin's the manager of this team next year?
At this point, I guess I would. And I say that based on that it's the manager who takes the fall. There's a history here of managers taking the fall. It's been rough. So I guess if you were asking me, if I always answer your call, and I can be in trouble a lot because then people go, you said this. And I don't know at this point. But if I'm betting based on my reporting, based on what has been going on here all year, I have to give you a yes or no, and the answer would be yes.
Oh, sorry, Kevin. Your phone's breaking up a little bit there. Could you repeat? Could you repeat that? Oh, sorry, we barely could hear you.
Oh, sorry about that. Arizona.
Yeah, of course, hot.
It can't be my phone's fault.
The weather.
Listen, my thing was I want to answer you, and my first answer is I don't know. But my answer to you, based on that, I like to, what you guys pay me for is give you answers. The answer is yes. I would be surprised. That's based on what I call educated speculation. I do a lot of reporting. And also there's just the knowledge of it's the manager who takes the fall. So I guess if you want me to give you a yes or a no, yes, I would be surprised. At this point, I don't know. And I'll say this. You fired a manager, and I'm not saying anything about the validity of the firing of Andy Green or Jake Singler. If you fired a manager after 19 and you fired a manager after 21, and if you fire a manager after 23, I think that's a pattern. And it's like, really? So it's like every manager's fault and not the people who've been here like the whole time or most of the time? I think that even if you fire him, we all still should have some questions about what the heck is going on here.
I'd be worried if I was the new manager in 2025 based on the odd year trend. Kevin Acee is with us right now. He's our Padres insider, Padres Diamondbacks in Phoenix. This is off our text line, Kevin. And I forget the exact article, but the texter wants to know, does the Soto quote match and support your reporting about Clubhouse fissures from this past May? Is that a fair question? Because you did write about that, right? We're going back a couple of months, but does that kind of follow up with some of the things you've been writing about for the last couple of months?
Sure, a little bit. I think it's two different things. We might be talking about like oranges and tangelos here. You know what I'm saying? Like it's different,
Yep.
but it's like they're different. It's not apples and oranges. So there's like a little thread there. But no, this was more about a guy who goes up every at bat, and whatever you want to say about his defense or the shuffle or his, whatever, right? Like Juan Soto battles every at bat. And like I said earlier in the interview, the reality is that this team, did two guys get on base in the final 4 innings or something like that? Like, I mean, nobody got on in the 7th or 8th, and then they're down 5 runs and 2 guys get on, and that has happened a lot. And they're 4 pitch at bats, they're 2 pitch at bats. I'm not saying they're quitting. I'm saying that when you have this many people saying stuff that like we were flat or we gave up, and then you see the evidence with your eyes, then there are at least questions. To answer that question, I'll reiterate. I think that no, but I think that they're related. Like, look, there have been questions all along. I think that was April that I reported that, the end of April, and that had been going on for a couple of weeks. That maybe a little bit of finger pointing, a little bit of this and that. It happens every single year. It goes away if you win. That I would say that is also something for us to continue to look at after the season.
Kevin, why is Xander Bogaerts continuously hitting in the fifth spot in this lineup?
A valid question again. Depending how many valid questions you're struggling. You know that over the past let's say since the All-Star break, he's been their second best hitter. Now, granted, that's something like 1 for 23 or 24 with runners in scoring position. All that. Who rotates in? You want to keep your right, left? Okay. Do you move? Is it Cronenworth because he's been hitting lately? Is it Sanchez or Campusano? Those are valid questions, but the fact is, like, Xander is consistently hitting. I do think that even though this has told me that this isn't necessarily an issue anymore, but I do think you also do have to, look at some of the, I hate to use the word egos. You have to look at the stature of the player, and unless you can really justify to a guy, people have pointed out to me Trey Turner was moved down. Have you seen the OPSs and the OPS pluses of 7 of the 9 players in their lineup, in the Phillies lineup? There were good options to move up when you move Trey Turner down. What is the reality of this lineup? A streaky Gary Sanchez, an unproven Luis Campusano. What are you going to do? Some guys, by the way, don't respond to being moved up in the lineup. And so there's a lot that goes into it that those of us asking the questions, I'm not saying they're not valid questions, but that aren't maybe necessarily aware of or, don't have to think about like Bob Melvin has to think about. But, yeah, look, I think he would have been moved down if he wasn't hitting whatever it is, 300 since the All-Star break. I think he would have been moved down.
It's just he hasn't driven anyone in, right? I mean,
two RBIs.
Right.
Yeah, but no, it's a fair point. It's a fair point. Your point is valid. It's not like he's hitting 110.
It's a very soft,
he just has not hit in the clutch. But he's not the only one, by the way, that has not hit in the clutch. No, it's a good point. Kevin Acee is our Padres insider. He's with us right now on John and Jim. We have another question off our text line, actually off our chat here. Matt wants to know, Kevin, does Bob Melvin? Who's responsible for the bullpen decisions? Is it Melvin? Is it Niebla? Is it the combination? And he also wants to know, is Melvin the one literally writing the lineup, or is that coming from above Melvin day in and day out?
Melvin has virtual control, total control over the lineup with discussions. And then there's, if your boss tells you something and says, hey, that's up to you.
Right.
But, maybe spend an hour talking about something else. That, about a certain way he'd go, so Bob has virtual control over that lineup, virtual total control. And then the bullpen decisions he leans on Niebla a lot, but I know of some times that maybe Niebla's higher on the guy than Bob, and Bob's the guy who has to answer for that. and has to use his own keel to say, you know what, even whatever the numbers say or however much I trust Ruben, that I don't think this is the spot for this guy. So my answer is it's Bob, but he really does lean on Ruben Niebla quite a bit.
The final one for me, Kevin. When should we expect to see Michael Wacha back?
Tuesday. It's virtually certain. He felt very good, is all the reports, after going 67 pitches, basically 5, simulated innings yesterday against minor leaguers down the road in Peoria, and he'll be back in there. He thinks he can go 90 pitches. Let's think more like 80 pitches Tuesday against the Orioles.
Never a dull moment, Kevin. 47 games to play. We'll do it again next week. Back when the Padres are home. We appreciate it. Have a good weekend in the desert.
See you guys. Thanks.